Welcome to the Marshall Pruitt Podcast, presented to you by Cooper Tires and the Justice Brothers. We are back with another episode of Inside the Sports Car Paddock, quickly becoming one of my favorite things to do each week, in addition to our Week in IndyCar and Week in Sports Car shows that are regulars, plus the little other features and featurettes we sprinkle in. This time, we have three special guests, along with our standing open guest, that being Jeff Braun, Supreme Race Engineer for the core Autosport IMSA team. Jeff leads us off a good, long, healthy discussion. Had a couple of questions and requests come into the two of us saying, hey, so you're a race engineer, great. What are the other positions in and around what you do? What are some of the things that are not necessarily directly connected to what you do? What's a team structure like for a top-tier, race-winning, championship-winning sports car program? So that's what Jeff and I open with, about 45 minutes or so. And so it's engineering, it's systems, it's organization, it's positions that might interest you. One of the things we get into fairly quickly is, hey, if you have a desire to do this, here's some of what these positions entail, how they do work within the function of a professional racing team. So who knows? This might be our standard tech, engineering, insidery conversation, plus a little bit more. Then we've got two great items from my Week in Sports Cars co-host, Graham Goodwin. We start off with our second interview, this being Lawrence Tomlinson, the owner and boss of Ginetta, LMP1 constructor, and some quality insights as to why Ginetta's fortunes in the WC as an LMP1 non-hybrid constructor have been more challenging than anyone would hope. So, great conversation between Graham and Lawrence. Then Graham moves on to young Harry Tincknell, who, it would appear, is driving everything for everyone this year. So Harry is up third, talking about his new opportunity with Carlin Racing and their entry into P2, knowing that Harry also represents Ford Chip Ganassi Racing in the FIA WEC and Mazda in IMSA's DPI category. The young kid is certainly, he's not leaving himself much free time, but that's also the mark of a high-quality driver. Then we close with our pal, Renger van de Zande, probably the best name in all sports car racing, coming off of the California 8-Hour, where he was a part of the JAS, JAS Motorsports Factory Honda Acura NSX GT3 program. So while they qualified on pole, race went a little bit sideways, but since I wasn't able to make it down, wanted to check in with Renger just to get his thoughts on the event, how things went with the team, and also what he's looking forward to here coming back to California shortly, representing the Wayne Taylor racing team in their Cadillac DPI VR. So that's what we have for you on Monday, April 1st. It is not an April Fool's edition. These are all real, so hopefully you enjoy them. And again, thanks to our pals at the Justice Brothers, at Cooper Tires, for making this all possible. Jeff Braun, we are back for another episode of learning lots and lots from my favorite race car engineer on the Marshall Pruitt Podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I can't, at one time I thought we were going to run out of things to talk about, but with everybody writing in, we just keep getting more and more, so it's fantastic. We can do this for a long time.
Hopefully, folks, after long enough, will forget, and then we'll just do the same topics, but pass them off like they're the same.
Right.
So this week we have a topic that came in from a listener, which I thought would be a lot of fun. You did as well. It's kind of a compare and contrast of how a team setup in IMSA might be compared to one in NASCAR, for example. And then also you and I said, well, let's take a deeper dive into the team composition in IMSA and talk about the various roles. We would probably use your core Autosport team as an example, but use those positions, talk about how you interact with those specific roles, how they interact back with you, and, for those who've always wanted to or wondered, maybe I'm not so bad turning a wrench. Maybe I could be a mechanic on a sports car team, or, hey, data acquisition might be my thing, tires, you name it. There are probably some roles that we might speak about that could, in theory, be of value to someone who's evaluating or contemplating volunteering, trying to get hired, just doing it on a local basis. So why don't we swim within there, my friend, and just start with the compare and contrast. So if we talk about an engineer like you, a race engineer in IMSA, if we took that same nomenclature and applied it to someone working the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series, it means something completely different. And crew chief and car chief and so many little nuances. You having experience in both series, I figure you're the perfect guy to tell us what's what.
Well, yeah, I've been out of NASCAR for a little while, but still have a bunch of friends there, and so I'm pretty sure they're still structured the same way. You know, you always hear about the NASCAR crew chiefs, you know, Chad Knaus and guys like that. They're really what in sports car racing would be more like the race engineer, like my job. You kind of what we call run the car, which is you're in charge of the overall running, operation, strategy, setup of the car. And in NASCAR, that's kind of the crew chief. In sports car racing, that's the race engineer. And where it gets confusing is then in NASCAR, the engineer he basically supports the crew chief with the vehicle dynamics information, with data acquisition stuff, with support of the information that the crew chief in NASCAR needs. In sports car racing, that's our data guy or our assistant engineer, depending on what title he has. For us at Core, I have my guy Tyler Neff, who's my assistant engineer, and he's like the engineer in NASCAR supporting me. A crew chief in sports car racing is probably a little bit better description. We have Ian Jones, who's our crew chief, and he's in charge of the crew. He's basically boiled down to in charge of the reliability of the car, the performance of the crew, the pit stops, the spare parts, the car itself, and the crew and how they actually get that done. In NASCAR, that person would be called a car chief, who's in charge of the car. So it's just really more titles. The same jobs get done. It's just a different title for each one of those positions. We have a car chief also on our team. Fred Johnson's our car chief, and he is just focused on the car, where the crew chief, Ian, is looking at are all the spare parts done? Are all the parts shipped in and received and prepared, and are all the things that I as a race engineer need to have done and prepared, alternate diffs, alternate gears, are all of those things prepared and ready to go, where the car chief is just focused on the car, and he's getting parts in from sub-assembly people and other things to build the car.
So if we look at the rest of the sports car crew composition, you have your mechanics who would work under in your structure, would that be under the car chief or under the crew chief? And I ask that maybe in terms of you saying, want to go up 2 flats on the rear ride height. Who ultimately, when you make that call, who receives it? I guess position-wise, and then who might pass that request down for that to be done?
Well, at the racetrack, and let's talk about the racetrack operation. In the shop, it can be a little bit different, but at the racetrack, we have a structure in place to make sure that nothing gets slipped through the cracks. So the way most teams work it is the race engineer would call for a change, whether it's on pit lane or even between sessions. And that goes directly to the crew chief, because he has to know everything. He has to be completely informed on everything that's happening on that car and with every one of his crew members. So if I want a rear ride height change, I could go to the rear end mechanic. Most teams are set up where there's a front end guy, a rear end guy, and then a floater who helps on wherever the help needs to be, whoever needs extra help. So I could go to the rear end guy and just say, go up 2 flats. But then my crew chief has no idea what I've done to the car, and I may have tasked that person with that job where he has a different task that he needs to do now in his ordering. So everything for me goes straight through our crew chief, and then he distributes the workload the way he sees fit, because he has the big picture over what everybody's doing.
And you mentioned something here, or you delve into something here, Jeff, that I wanted to, or was hoping you would, and it's that while by structure you might be the big, all-important, all-commanding person, but that doesn't mean you are the conductor telling each person what to do. Indeed, you are part of a chain of command, if you want to call it that, and no matter the title or position or how high you are, you still not just have to honor that chain of command, but you need to honor that system.
Yes, it's kind of like, I guess, a lot of different organizations, an NFL team or any kind of organization that works efficiently, is people are in charge of their own certain areas, and if they have all the information they need to do their job, then they can do it correctly. So I really look at my job as a race engineer, especially like between sessions, is to give my crew guys the time to do what we need to do, the information that they need to do it in, and then try not to ever give them any surprises. So I try to keep them updated on what my plan is, where I want to go, so that they're all thinking about it. So, because when it gets right down to it, me as a race engineer, I don't really do anything. I don't lift anything. I don't change any parts. I don't pick up a wrench. I don't repair anything. I don't pump the tires up. I don't set the pressures. I don't do anything. I need those guys to do all the hard work. And if I can give them more time and explain why I'm doing it and where I might be going, they'll just be able to do it better.
I'm just going to throw this in as a little random thing. It maybe kind of fits the theme, but it just stands out as a perfect thing to share. I would love it for most radio folks and television folks who don't come from pit lane, who haven't been professional race car drivers, and there are many who do. So, bear in mind there are still some who just simply don't, and their expertise is, doing play-by-play commentary and so on. I would just love for them to spend a session with a team like yours or others, Jeff, because they would come away with such a different understanding of what is taking place than what most fans are offered or subjected to during a practice session. One of the great things that, again, I love hearing commentators say is, it's only a practice session. It's not the race, it's not qualifying, so there's no need for them to be going 100%. And every time I'm just like, where do you get this nonsense?
Right.
Then you get the, they're off just a little bit. They just sent them back out in, again, usually a practice session. Well, they probably just want to see if they can find more speed, find some more time, and you go, right. Jeff Braun has been doing this his entire career and is well paid for what he does. And if the best he could come up with on the timing stand during this hour session is, well, just go back out there and see if you can find some more time, you wouldn't have a job very long, my friend.
I would be instantly fired.
So I'm mentioning all this, and this is actually a topic for a separate episode. Please add this to the list. But that is exactly what I'm getting to, is a list, a test plan, a run plan. There is no such thing as, all right, guys, well, we got a practice session coming up. Let's go out and pound around and wear out a bunch of tires and burn up some fuel and see where we end up. No.
Right.
Everything you mentioned about, now granted, a diff change during a practice session, that'd be a little bit rich if you called for that. But please have this alternate, damper package waiting on pit lane. We might try this rear wing configuration that's different, so have the spare wing assembly set so we can bolt that on. Here's a whole list of things. I want to do ride height sweeps. We might do a geometry. There's all kinds of things that might take place. So
Absolutely.
Despite what you might be hearing over, your PA or your internet radio, there's no real guesswork going on here. There's a Jeff Braun and dozens of other race engineers who spend time to come up with very detailed lists. That's not just for you to try and that for the drivers to carry out, but for the crew looking for as well, going, somewhere around the 30-minute mark, we might be doing this. Hey guys, get this ready. You get your wrenches ready, and when he comes in next, we're going to, make this fundamental change to the car.
Exactly. I mean, we'll prepare. Let's say, like you said, a rear damper package might have a different spring rate on it, or might have different valving or something like that. Well, that takes some time to change on the car, and Ian, our crew chief, will actually, at times, if it's something we haven't done in a while or something that's a little different that we're not really used to, between sessions, he'll actually, if I come up with him and say, hey, I'm really thinking we're going to try this geometry change. Oh, he'll go, boy, we haven't done that in a while. I'm going to have the guys practice it. And they'll actually practice that change under the tent before the session. So I know exactly how much time it's going to take them on pit lane. And they have their procedure down for it. And so we can go to pit lane and there's 8 minutes left in the session, and I know they can do it in 4.5 minutes. I can call for that change and still get out and get a lap and a half to test it. And so, that's why the crew chief needs to know everything that's going on. He's when I say the engineer runs the car, well, the crew chief, I'm really working for him. I gotta make everything work perfectly for him. And then you have all these other people involved in it that need to know what's going on too. My tire guy is a great example. Most people think a tire guy, well, what does he do? He puts air in the tire, checks the pressures maybe, and takes them down to Michelin and gets them changed when they're wore out. But the tire guy, Steve Johnson, my tire guy, is an integral part of the engineering of the car and the performance of the car. He'll make tire pressure changes based on what driver's getting in the car, or whether we're going to do a qualifying run or a longer run, or what the fuel level is, because he's trying to hit a hot pressure target that I've given him, and he needs to adjust for all the conditions that are changing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of moving parts with a lot of people.
And so, of the other roles you mentioned there, your tire engineer, your tire person, I mean, you are asking for information the moment the car comes to a stop, so being able to go around and get not only pressure, but also temperatures across the tire surface, traditionally in 3 spots, middle, inside, and out, and try to get that, and that comes back to you not only ASAP, but you are not only asking for that, but I think there's just an expectation, because at least among the many things a race engineer is looking at and trying to orchestrate during, a car coming in during a session, is getting a feel for where your tires are at, because if the driver's complaining of something at the right rear, boy, the car is just doing this a lot, before you would want to consider whether it's ride height, toe, spring, all kinds of stuff, you're going to need to get the report from the tires telling you what they're doing. So just roll-wise, as you mentioned, it might just be putting nitrogen in tires, or folks might think it's just inflate, deflate. That's what the person does. Indeed, the relationship between race engineer and your tire person, it's right up there with the driver in terms of importance.
Absolutely. I mean, you just nailed it. That relationship and how you trust each other. And, he has to listen to things like, if I'm working through some rear spring stuff for instance, and we're trying like a little stiffer, a little softer, he's watching those rear tire pressures, and he's even watching it on telemetry live. And so he can anticipate what's happening, and he needs to, he might see the rear tire pressures going up. And I'm working on other things and looking at other things during this run, or thinking about what the next change is going to be. And if he sees what we're doing and hears what we're working on, he may just give me a little nudge and get on the crew channel and say, you got the right rear going up. It looks like that spring is not working, or is working, if that's what I was trying to do. So he's almost like assisting me with how the changes are working. And then, because the tires are kind of like a telltale of, it's kind of a report on the health and what happened. So it's your first indication of whether the car got looser, or it's understeering more, or we're generating more temperature. So he sees it directly, and it's vital that the engineer and the tire guy are really on the same page, just like a driver, or just like my assistant engineer, my data guy who's doing fuel and strategy.
So let's stay on the crew side before we come back to timing stand. So you have your, we'll just call them over-the-wall crew, your mechanics. What kind of other things, or share with folks some of the things that you're not necessarily asking them to do each time the car comes in during practice or during a stop, but they just know to do habit-wise, performance-wise, to feed that back to you. I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is for folks who look closely or able to look closely, you'll notice teams have a variety of contraptions they've come up with. It's usually some sort of a telescoping something. For some, it's a very thin mirror. I've actually seen folks take like a wing mirror off of a car and affix that to the end, but check, it's not just to make sure the bottom of the car is still there, but there's some very important information too about ride height and wear that data system is not going to give you the full picture. But just tell us about some of the things the crew is doing and you're interacting with them every time the car comes in to help you.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing, and if anybody gets a chance to watch a practice session and get close enough to see what happens, you'll see when the car comes in and stops on its marks, right at that point, there's a very choreographed kind of routine, and yes, we do practice it. When we start off the season with maybe there's some personnel changes, we have some new mechanics, or people have been moved into new positions, we will practice that in the shop, just like you would practice a pit stop during a race, tire changes and stuff. Everybody knows we practice that, but we'll actually practice what we do when the car comes in. So there's a man holding the signboard, car stops on the signboard, crew jumps over the wall, one guy jacks the car up, the other guys all go into their positions. There will be a person, as you said, with a mirror, or some, I've even known some people that use like an iPhone type camera that slide under there with it recording and pull it back out, and then they can look at it. And those people are looking at the skids and the wear and how much wear it is. That skid is usually painted before each session, or even during a session sometimes, or it's taped to see how much wear there is and whether it's wearing more on one side or the other, or more on the front than the rear. Helps us with our ride height settings, and it obviously varies with fuel load, so it's something we consider, but somebody will do that. Immediately, we've talked about the intercom. The intercom is plugged in so that I can talk to the driver, and the crew chief, Ian, our crew chief, is listening to that conversation. And if I knew a direction that we might go before the car stopped, I might tell Ian, hey, I'm thinking about a rear wing change. It's not stable in the high-speed corners. I'm trying this one change, but if it doesn't work, I'm going to add some wing. So Ian's already thinking that way. Car comes in, intercom gets plugged in, he's listening to the driver. the other mechanics are checking the normal things, checking the tires, checking for, they're checking tire pressures, they're checking the skids, they're checking just basic, front suspension, make sure nothing's loose, and they're kind of in pause mode in their positions. And as I'm talking to the driver, Ian, the crew chief, will hear, no, it's still loose in the high-speed corners. That's not stable enough, and he knows what's coming. And he'll get on the crew channel and tell his guys be ready with the rear wing tools. And the driver and I will be talking, and Ian will be looking at me, and it might get to the point where I don't even have to say anything. I just kind of give him the thumbs up, and he says, okay, guys, change the rear wing, 2 more degrees rear wing, because he knows it's coming. And so then the guys spring into action. They've practiced this. We know which 2 guys are going to change the rear wing settings. They're changing that, and we're about done. Tire guy has his pressures. Skids are checked. Wing is changed. Jack's out. And I give one final check with my data people to make sure that we can unplug the data cables so that we don't unplug it in the middle of them uploading or downloading some new programs to the car. Boom, we send them out. Because that whole choreography, I guess is how you say it, is so important. I've always said that if you have a 1-hour session and I get 7 setup change guesses and my competition only gets 6, I'm ahead because I got one more guess on something to try than he did.
Yeah. And it's that efficiency too, being that that mindset of we all have the same amount of time. We all have probably the same general thoughts, ideas, curiosities, something that we might want to test during the session. That's where this little nuance, it's not little, that's where this significant nuance of preparing the team, getting everything laid out for each of these changes, the team drilling on these items back at the shop. So when you call for something, it might be, I don't want to say strange, but maybe you want to try something that is not commonly done, might take a little bit longer. You don't want your team, you don't want to be the team that leaves that session with 5 changes, down 1 instead of up 1 with 7, because as a group, you weren't prepared to knock that out as fast, if not faster than the others. So, there's competition. There's all kinds of competition, lots of it having nothing to do with what takes place on track. Let's talk, Jeff. Let's close on the timing stand aspect. So we know a lot about how things relate to what you do as a race engineer, but there are some other positions on the timing stand that, folks who might have an interest or an inclination for such things would say, what do those folks around Jeff do? What do they give him? What do they feed him? What are their roles? What does he ask them to do? So why don't we kind of round out there?
Sure. And I think most IMSA DPI teams are set up this way. We're a small team, so we probably have less people in each one of these positions, but there's really, I'm going to say, let's say 5 of us directly plugged into the timing stand. And so it's me in charge of the car and directly hooked up on the intercom with the rest of these people. Sitting to my left usually is Tyler Neff, my assistant engineer, and during practice, he's in charge of the amount of fuel in the car, the number of laps we can go. He's calibrating the fuel reading system so that he's confident it's accurate in the race, because he's the guy ultimately going to be responsible for when I say, can we make it to the end on this? And we're an hour away from the finish of the race, and he says yes. He's got to get that right. We can't run out of fuel. So he's calibrating all of those systems and making sure that's accurate, plus watching all of his data systems to make sure that the information's coming in correctly, the telemetry's working right. When the car stops in pit lane, I may have given him some previous information that I'd like him to look at. Like, let's take that wing change that we fictitiously just called for. When the car leaves, I may say, Tyler, I need to know what that cost us in top speed and what it did to the ride heights in turn 7. And so when the car stops, he's downloading the data and immediately looking at that, if he hasn't already started to do that by the live telemetry, because I want an answer for that the minute the car stops so I can decide what the next change is going to be. So he's looking at all of that as my assistant engineer. Behind us in the stand are some people that don't even get to see the car. It's really boring for them. They're looking at their computer screens. They're behind the stand. They literally, for the whole practice or race, will not see one car pass them by. They're completely blind other than their computer screen.
Yeah, they're standing behind the timing stand with a little fold-out table from the timing stand in most instances, with screens in front of them as well. But yeah, to your point, whereas you're sitting atop the timing stand and looking down, and sometimes depending upon how the overhead structure is built, the awning, you might not actually get a super clear view of the racetrack itself. It might be a little bit of like, I can look down and see when our car comes in, but beyond that, it's not a lot else.
Yeah, that's the way Long Beach is a good example. I see it when it stops in front of me in the pits, and then I kind of see it between the palm trees and in the front wall and the fence a little bit when it flashes by, but you don't really get to see it that much. These guys, though, they never get to see it. So I have Lee, who is in charge of, basically, I would call him I'm sure we have a better name for him, but he's our systems guy. So every electronic system, there's a lot of logic. We've talked about, I think, at Daytona, we needed some logic reprogrammed because we had a sensor failure.
Yep.
And Lee's the guy that is in charge of all of that logic, of all the sensors and all the programming and all the power distribution through the car. So he's monitoring at all times the systems of the car, the alternator, is it charging correctly? Are we drawing too much amperage? Are the fuel pumps working properly? Is one starting to get weak? Do we have to switch to the backup fuel pump? Are the ignition timing crank trigger sensors working properly? Is, everything from the heated windscreen to anything that has a wire connected to it? Lee's in charge of making sure that, monitoring it, making sure it's accurate and working well. Super important full-time job on these complex sports cars. And then I have Henry, who sits right next to Lee, and he's in charge of the engine and the calibration of the engine and the traction control systems. So we've talked about IMSA requiring a certain tolerance of our fuel mixture and our boost ratios. Henry monitors that constantly, and as things change with either the engine performance or atmospheric conditions or how we're loading the engine or temperature, he's monitoring those systems and asking me to ask the driver to make a change to the fuel mixture map to keep us within range or the boost map to keep us within range. And during practice, he's looking at those things, but he's also working actually directly with the driver on traction control settings. So when the car comes in, we plug the intercom in, and Henry will, when I'm done with talking to the driver about the chassis setup, Henry will work directly with him on traction control settings. And, is it holding you back too much here? How can we help you here? How is it in the bumps? What does it do at the exit of the corner? And he will make changes to the traction control mapping to try to help the driver achieve what he needs. And the interesting thing, much like the tire guy, is the traction control settings and mapping change with the chassis setup. If I change a rear spring, the tire guy's going to see it in his results and his pressure, and he's going to have to either compensate for it or at least point it out to me. Henry, our traction control guy, is going to see the same thing. He's going to see the rear tire spinning more or lower less because we're making more traction. And now we might need a traction control adjustment and a tire pressure adjustment and a ride height adjustment based on the fact that I changed the spring 100 pounds.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So those guys are all focused on that. And then we have the last thing is we have Ian, our crew chief. He's plugged in too, so hearing all of this because he's going to have to decide who's going to make what changes and when they're going to do it. And then we have our team manager who's over the whole team, Brian Colangelo, who is also listening, and he is he's the big picture guy on the race weekends, and he needs to know exactly what's going on, and he'll be looking at more procedures and processes that will be changed on a week-to-week basis rather than maybe a minute-to-minute basis.
Well, we were going to try and do 2 topics this episode, Jeff. I think we'll just stick and close with this one here and hold the second one, knowing that we've got Long Beach coming up shortly, and we've had some folks ask when we do have a race that's coming up, if we could, in our Inside the Sports Car Paddock visit, have a little bit of Jeff Braun preview of what's needed at that track to succeed. I think we might try and roll those 2 items into an upcoming show, but
Perfect.
Why don't we wrap on this then? And since we're sticking with the single topic for today, and it comes back to you on information management. So, if for those who are listening, you will have heard that when a car either comes to a stop or is out on track, you have folks reporting back to you with tire pressure and temperature information, possibly information from the underside of the car, wear on planks and such. You will have feedback from your driver telling you what they just experienced, and inevitably a driver's not going to come in and say, everything's great, we're done. It's going to be some sort of, hey, Brown, you missed this, you nut, or there's something there. You're going to have your assistant engineer not just feeding you data, but looking at things that they think you would want to know or would help you in your decision making. You've already mentioned your traction control, your TC and engine person as well that will be feeding you info. We have your systems person who might not be giving you, you might not need to know the amperage hitting a certain tail light, but there could be information there. You've got your crew chief who might be telling you, hey, we see this thing's a little wonky, we're going to need a minute to tighten that up, whatever it could be.
Yep, exactly.
Run us through a couple of minutes of your life as a race engineer on pit lane during a session, when a car comes in, and call out the different points of info you might be receiving, how you process that, and then how you regurgitate that to call for whatever you want next. I think folks might be amazed at how your brain doesn't just fall out of your ear.
Well, yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, that's a good. Okay, let me try. So, let's say we've made a change, and the car leaves the pit lane. That's when it first starts for me. It's the first thing that goes through my mind is I immediately know how much time I have left in the practice session, and I start thinking about what problem we've been facing. So let's go, we've kind of been using rear instability as a problem. So I've made my next guess. We're still trying to fight this rear instability problem. He goes out of the pits. The first thing I think is, okay, that change that I just made is not going to work. My worst case scenario, he comes back in and goes, oh, that was no better. Okay, so while he leaves pit lane, while he's starting his warm-up lap to try it, I'm already thinking, if that doesn't work, what am I going to do next? And I come up with the next answer. And at the same time, I think, what if it does work? What's the next step? What's now going to be the problem that we're going to be fighting? And I try to come up with an answer for that. And I'll get on the intercom right away, and I'll tell my crew chief, Ian, I'll say, okay, if we still have the same problem, I'm going to probably do this. If this fixed it, the next change will probably be this. So then Ian springs into action with his crew, and he makes sure that he has the tools and the parts and the crew briefed for either one of those scenarios. And at about that time, the car comes by for its first lap. And now he's going to start to get a read on it. Tyler, my data guy, has been hearing all of this, so he's starting to look at some data to see if we've solved this instability problem. And I might get a reading from him after 4 or 5 corners. Hey, it looks like he's braking a little later. I think it's better. And, so I get a preliminary hint, okay, it's better. So we're probably going to use that second change. And I might even go to Ian and say, hey, it looks a little better. I think, be ready for that, whatever, other change that is unrelated. I think we might want to do that. So then we're going around. Henry, my TC guy, may say, boy, he's harder in the TC off the corner, but he's carrying more speed into the corner. So now I'm pretty sure that the stability problem has been helped. So now the car comes in, stops, and I usually let my drivers decide when to stop. I want a good reading on the change. I don't want them to run extra laps, but my guys, Colin, he knows when he's got a feel for it. And that could be a half a lap, it could be 3 laps, but it won't ever be one more lap than what he needs to feel it, because he knows he wants to get in and make another change. So he stops, he'll say, coming to you, pit lane, boom, stop on the sign. We plug in the data cables and the intercom. I have my computer set up with a form in Excel that I've developed over the years that allows me to add this information very quickly. The first thing is he starts talking, and he knows that we need to make a change fast. So instead of some long, drawn-out debrief about, I was going through turn 3 and a guy cut me off, and then da-da-da, he gets right to the point. Okay, the rear stability is fixed. That did it. And the minute I hear that, I can actually look at Ian, and he knows that the change I had set up for the instability problem, we don't need. We're going to go to the next change. So he might even start his guys toward that. And I'll see them, maybe it's something at the front that I had decided, I'll see them start to take the nose off the car or head that way, and I'll give him a thumbs up, like, yeah, we're going to do that. And he might even start that. Then Colin and I will continue to talk about the change, and I'll say, okay, so now what we need to do is fix that jumping in the middle of the corner at the front, right? And he'll go, yes. Well, my guys have already started on that because we had this pre-planned. About that time, I get my tire sheet from Steve Johnson, and I'll look at that actually, in most of the time, Steve Johnson will hand me the tire sheet, and if he just hands it to me and kind of gives me a quick thumbs up, I don't even look at it, because I know he's happy with it. If he hands it to me and points to something, it'll draw my attention to it, and I'll go, that's weird, that pressure is a little higher than what we thought, or that temperature is a little different. But so I get a quick check of the tire sheet, but I trust Steve so much that unless he's jumping up and down or pointing something out to me, I'm pretty much good. I got that information, I stick it, he gives it to me on a sticky note, and I stick it right next to my computer. At the same time, Tyler's already looked at it, and he goes, yeah, that was much better on the entry. On the data, he's braking 12 feet deeper, and he carried 3 more miles an hour in the middle of the corner. I can see that bouncing problem in the front is now worse because he's carrying more speed. So all that lines up with what we're doing on pit lane already, making this change. The skid guy pops up from underneath the car, and he'll talk to Ian, and Ian may then, the crew chief Ian may say to me, hey, it looks like we've got more contact on the skid. Well, that kind of makes sense because we're carrying more speed and it's bouncing. So good, that information all kind of goes along. And the brake guy, there's usually a brake tech there from the brake manufacturer, will oftentimes hand me a brake sheet. That gets stuck right next to my tire temperature sheet. I've typed in Colin's comments, and now the change has been made, and we're ready to go back out. The data guys all confirm that they're ready to unplug. I say safe to unplug. The intercom comes out, the data cables come out, and away we go. Back out to try it again. And I will then type into my form on my computer the tire pressures, the brake pressures, the brake temperatures, and the tire temperatures, and the change that we made in my form, and then the process starts over.
Wow.
And we'll do that, and that is one change. That's one change of, usually we'll get 5, sometimes as many as 6 changes in an hour session. If we're really on it, we can get 6 changes, but 4 or 5 changes like that every 1 hour session.
The glamour. We're just strictly about the glamour here. It's a management exercise as much as anything. So
it is.
Well, this has been awesome, and part of the fun in doing this for me, Jeff, is just I get to try and serve up some of these things that I either know from doing it or having been a part of a team being asked by the engineer to do these things. So it's just, hopefully folks are enjoying the fact that you're getting to understand not just a little bit more, but if you do get a chance to be on an IMSA pit lane, or a variety of road racing based pit lanes where professional stuff is happening, probably take what Jeff just spelled out and apply that and understand that, aha, all right, so the car came to a stop. Now I'm expecting, based on what Jeff said, this is probably going to happen, and I'm waiting for that person with the tire pressure gauge to probably walk over with a piece of paper for Jeff here in about 3, 2, 1. All right, that just happened.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of a behind-the-scenes blueprint of how I would say any quality sports car team is going to work, and in this case, a race-winning, championship-winning team. So thanks for taking some time to pull back the curtains here, Jeff, and that's honestly really about all we're wanting to do each week, is just help bring race fans closer to this technical engineering strategy, whatever side, and understand the geekery a little bit more.
Right. I hope that people, next time they go, like you said, Marshall, next time they go watch a practice session, go to the pit lane and watch how it's choreographed. It's almost, it's very, very similar to a pit stop. You watch a pit stop and you think how practice that is. A practice session is very similar. You'll see the routines and the systems and the procedures, and that's what makes pro teams operate at the level they do. It's their systems, procedures, processes, and all of that, and that's a lot of fun to watch.
All right, my friend. Well, we will look forward to next week's episode, where we will be speaking about the Acura Grand Prix at Long Beach, and we will be getting into traffic management setups to deal with traffic, but also talk about the unique challenges of that short, beloved, bumpy, and somewhat asking a car to do everything at the same time street course. So until then, Jeff, thank you as always for your time, my friend, and we'll look forward to speaking next week.
Sounds great. Talk to you soon.
Graham Goodman, the Lancashire boy, but here in Yorkshire, in Garforth, and in the factory, the race shop for Ginetta cars, and looking at 2 splendid LMP1 cars sitting here, I'm afraid, rather idle. And I guess the question for the man standing next to me, who's the owner of Ginetta, Lawrence Tomlinson. Lawrence, why are they idle?
Well, we'd love to see them out, just as I'm sure everybody listening would. The chassis itself's been great, but we had engine issues with the Mechachrome, as you know, at Le Mans. So we're just prepping them now to put the AR units in, which we've tested at Silverstone at the end of last year, and the car ran really well.
Now, unbeknownst to you, a couple of the boys collared me on the way in here, and they tell me that these aren't going to be idle for very much longer. You're going testing.
Yeah, we're taking the Ginetta AR out to Aragon for the 3-day tests, and just doing some setup work on it, really, because the car was totally reliable at Le Mans. Other than the engine harness on car 6, both cars would have finished.
One of the, I guess, regrets of the WC's entry list, certainly for Spa, but we can sort of understand why not for Le Mans, but for Spa is, my recollection from talking to some of your guys is, when you're looking to get one of the cars out there, why aren't we going to see the Ginetta LMP1 complete one more race this season?
Well, I wouldn't say we're not going to see them at Spa. We definitely wanted to get a car out at Spa, and we put our driver lineup in. But TRSM never got paid by the Chinese and seemed to have run up a few fines for not attending. And whilst the entries have all been paid for, and Ginetta were prepared to, and still are prepared to, pay for the cars to run, and AR were helping us with the engines, we're not really prepared to pay
Euro fine.
Well, 130,000 euro fine for someone else not turning up at races. But if WEC change their minds, the cars are ready, and we'd be happy to rock and roll.
That could be cool, couldn't it?
That'd be brilliant, and we'd love to see one out in competition. You know, it shows teams that the car's quick. We know the chassis is good. We know the AR's a good unit, so I think we've got a great package, and really just need a proper team to come up that's funded, and you know, I could do a pretty good deal on these cars to get them out for 2019, 2020 for sure.
Honest Lawrence's LMP1 car.
Yeah, honest, yeah.
It's not the only car you got for sale. There was a spectacular new Ginetta. I've just seen her being wheeled towards her next display down on the factory floor below us, up on the mezzanine level, which is where the LMP cars are assembled here at Ginetta. And that's the Akula. Tell us a bit about that. That made something of a splash in the Geneva Motor Show. Yeah,
the Ginetta Akula, it's our first real supercar, and it's designed from a blank sheet of paper with some really nice, interesting bits. Mid-engined, so it's hard to call it front mid-engine when it's mid-engined, and fantastic aero, you know, class-leading aero. So very light car, comes in at 1150 kilos on the road. So it's going to be a fun thing. Limited production, probably about 20 cars a year, and we're sold out till 2021 from the show. I was just amazed at the interest. Yeah, it's taking us into a new dimension. So we're very happy with the direction that we're going.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong. You usually do. But my understanding is that's probably the first Ginetta we've seen under your ownership from scratch that's not going to be a race car. It's going to be a road car only. Yeah, just a road car. So I know we're all into motorsports, but currently we've no plans to run this car in anything. Depends whether, you know, obviously you've got the hypercar rules, which are still evolving, and the LMP1s. It looks like the LMP1 chassis to me is going to be certainly valid for 2 years, possibly 3. And you know, after that, let's see where the hypercar rules go. Yeah. Now, LMP1, you were very early adopters of the current rule set. Behind us, we've got a couple of Ginetta G58s derived from the original LMP3 Ginetta, and again, that was a rule set, ACO rule set, that's you stepping up and making a pretty bold move into that market, made it happen back in 2015.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think everyone knows that there wouldn't be any LMP3 if Ginetta hadn't worked so closely with the ACO to develop the first car. And developing it in a sort of 6-7 month time period was a big ask, but we got all the cars out for Silverstone and the cars ran. So yeah, we're going to go with the new rules for 2020, and bodywork changes and things like that. And I think we've got some good improvements to the car, because obviously our car was 2 or 3 years older than the Norma that it was racing, and it's still quite a competitive car, even though it was designed in such a rush at the time, the original one. But
very quick in a straight line.
Oh, it's very quick. I mean, there's that lovely photograph, isn't there, with Road to Le Mans with Charlie driving it and 14 Ligiers behind it. The car in front's a Ginetta was the slogan we used. But so you know, it's been a fun journey, and we're going back into LMP3 in a big way. So I think, you know, looks like we probably have a dozen cars out, and with teams as soon as we can build them.
It's remarkable, really, the story of LMP3, not just with Ginetta, but where we're standing here, this science park, this industrial park, with you here with Ginetta, and across the road for the moment, so their new factory opens, Richard Dean with United. It was for 3 years the ELMS LMP3 title held by teams and companies on this trading estate. Remarkable.
Yeah,
not just in the UK,
we won,
right here.
We won We won in 2015, with Sir Chris Hoy and Charlie, and then literally I can throw a stone at Dini.
And often do?
No, we go and have a cup of tea, but we don't throw a stone. So, it's good, and I think it'll be interesting. I mean, Ligier done a great job in the number of cars they've got out there, and Norma did a good car in probably 16. I think their car maybe came out 16, 17. So
time for another step.
Yeah, it's time to move it on. You've got new driveline package coming and new look cars, and I think the ACO want the cars to look a little bit more like a road sort of base product. So we've got some nice styling on the car, which I think will help, and some new safety features in it as well.
Well, before I persuade you, put your arm up your back and ask whether or not I can have a quiet look at what's going on with your CAD screens and see whether or not you let me do that. When are we going to see those new cars visually for the first time, and when are we going to see those cars out testing and then racing?
Yeah, the molds, the carbon molds are in production for the uprated bodywork, so it should be at Le Mans it should be at Le Mans this year, 2019, in June.
For reveal.
Unfortunately, the Ginetta LMP1 won't, though, so...
Wry smile.
That's the way it goes.
But then for 2020, we'll be seeing those new cars on the grids across Europe and across the world.
Yeah, the idea is we'll work with 2 or 3 teams with the new car to develop it with them before the first race, and probably Mike Simpson and myself and Charlie Robertson sit in and do some laps in some team cars and help them get them to the level they need to be, but I think they're going to be at the front.
Excellent stuff. Let's finish off with a couple of words more about this the Ginetta P1 cars. They've now raced just once at Le Mans last year, and as you quite rightly said, been unlucky in this year of perfect storm with the Le Mans entry list, been turned down for those entries this year. You've still got those hopes of seeing the car race this year. I guess it's a proving run, really, to show people what this thing can do.
No, I'd love the car to run at Spa, just to be in direct competition with the other LMP1 cars and the LMP1H, and see where we were with Toyota. But the car's here and ready to go. I guess it depends whether how much WEC need the fine money.
Well, fingers crossed, let's hope a deal can be done. We'd love to see him running, and let's see whether or not there's new life ahead for the Ginetta LMP1 car. I sort of think, with the wry smile that you've got on your face, that's part of the plan, Lawrence. Thanks very much for that. Harry Tincknell, it's another top-line sports car programme for you, Harry.
Hey, Graham. Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Really, really looking forward to being back in the ELMS. Obviously, great memories in the past there, with Jota, and exciting to be back with Carlin. Wouldn't be where I am today without them, their support and guidance and coaching in my F3 days, and Thunderhead Carlin Racing is a new venture, and it's going to be exciting.
So tell us a little bit about your history with Trevor and the team, and then tell us a little bit more about exactly what the programme is. We know the headlines, but tell us what detail you can share with us, Harry. But first, what about your heritage with Carlin Motorsport?
Yeah, so I did British F3 in 2012 with Carlin, and then European F3 the following year. So I finished fifth in the European Championship, and I kind of, at the end of that year, was the point where Alan was like, I think sports cars is the right time to move across now, and that's where my sort of sports car career started with Jota. But I think F3 is the sort of university of motorsports where you really learn everything in terms of setting up the car and driving technique and working with the team, and obviously back then you could develop the car in the wind tunnel and everything like that, so driver feedback was really important. And you're 18, 19 years old, so you're really learning your craft, and had a really great engineer there called Stefan de Groot, who's still with the team, and he's going to be supporting us a little bit this year as well. And it's really, obviously, if I hadn't been with Carlin, if I hadn't met Stefan, I don't think I'd be as good a driver as I am today. So amazing to be back, and I know Trevor for a long time now has been sort of eyeing up sports cars and trying to find the right moment to sort of come into that paddock, and that moment's now. So really exciting And yeah, obviously Carlin, huge history of Dallara. I think Travis said the other day they've had over 60 Dallara chassis in the history. It's madness. So linking up with them is going to be great. I think we're the only Dallara on the grid in the ELMS, so we're going to have really good support from them, and then with Jack, known Jack for a few years now. We're actually good friends, and been sort of supporting him in the background a little bit the last couple of seasons. So great to actually finally be in the car with him. He's rising star in British sports car racing, and he's done a great job so far in all the testing. He's really improving fast, and I think we're going to see a really quick lad, for the next year or two, coming through in sports cars. And obviously Ben Barnicoat, he's been part of the Racing Steps program for a long time. Very, very quick, straight away in the car, and obviously has his McLaren role in the background as well. So it's a really good young team. I guess I'm kind of going from being sort of youngest in the team with Ford or with Mazda to the oldest in the team, and now they're taking the mickey out of me for being the dad of the team, whereas usually it's the other way around with Andy and Jonathan.
Mate, it comes to us all. I mean, I guess the thought occurs to me here. You have had now huge experience and real success in sports car racing, what with Jota back in the LMP2 days and Le Mans success there, then into the Ford GT programme, and that going very well, and obviously with Mazda and DPI. But rather oddly, this is a bit of a new chapter, isn't it? Because, am I right, you've not raced one of the Gibson LMP2s?
No, never. Not since the rule change for, was it 2016, 2017?
17 season, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, really excited to be back. I never really wanted to leave the ELMS, to be honest, but obviously had a fantastic opportunity with Ford, and when Simon sort of stopped, Simon Dolan stopped racing really with, the end of the 2016 season after we won the championship, been kind of trying to find a way to get back in, and but I always wanted it to be the right opportunity. But this is certainly it. So really excited to be back in, and obviously first few tests of the car have been over the last few weeks, and I think we're improving, and we're looking forward to obviously the first race. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be at the first race. I'm in Long Beach with Mazda, but we've got super sub Ollie Pla filling in for me there, so the team's going to be in good hands, and then I'll rejoin them from Monza onwards. But it's exciting, and we've got a good mix of sports car experience and single seater experience guys across the team. So I think we'll be able to take sort of the best points from each of them, and hopefully have a strong first year. And obviously first couple of races we're probably going to be the dark horses a little bit, but I'm pretty sure as the season goes on, we're only going to get stronger and stronger. And like I said already, Jack's improved a lot, even in the first couple of tests, and all stuff like pit stops and driver changes, and we're really getting on top of everything now. But it's exciting for me to be part of a new team, having been sort of with established teams now for quite a while, and being able to put sort of some of my experience, hand that over to them rather than sort of being the one that's learning everything all the time. So it's an interesting dynamic for me, and really, really looking forward to it.
It'll be interesting to see, isn't it? It clearly is. It's a bit of a toe in the water from Carlin, with Jack's efforts and wishes kind of anchoring that as to whether or not they might see a future in sports car racing. Any thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is the start. I don't think this is the end game for Thunderhead Carlin. This is the start. I think it's only going to get bigger. Obviously, let's not run before we can walk. We need to do the job, get some results on the board. But I certainly think that this isn't the first and only season. This is and the one car team and everything like that. I think there's big plans for the future. But like I say, we've got to show we can do the job first. Trevor and Thunderhead have certainly built a good solid team together, and in such a short period of time. But obviously the proof will be on the circuit, and but like I say, I think everyone, whether it's at where it's Trevor or all the other guys at Carlin, they're very excited about what this could become.
And to make that splash in year one, you're right. I mean, it's going to be, I'm sure, a learning curve for everybody in the team. But to make that splash, I'm not sure I've seen stronger competition in as much depth in a top class in the LMS ever.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, obviously, Jones were leading the way when I was with them, and myself and Felipe Albuquerque, and obviously lastly Guido van der Gaard along with Simon. And you've seen people like Ollie Turvey and Brendan Hartley and lots of strong guys coming through the championship. So I think it's always been strong, but I think you'd be hard pressed to say there's a harder year, to come into it and perform and get podiums and hopefully race wins. But like I say, it's important that we come in and get results. Le Mans now is so oversubscribed and everything like that. It's important, to try and to qualify for the Le Mans 24 Hours on Merit. I'm sure that's kind of in the back of our minds a little bit. It's obviously going to be difficult the first year in the ELMS, but I mean, when you look at the list of drivers and the achievements and the teams involved now, it's high quality.
Final question for me, and it revolves around that Dallara chassis. You're right, unique this season, for full season at least, in the ELMS. Might there be anything you can learn from that experience that you could feed back into the process with the Multimatic chassis Mazda against the current might at the moment of the Cadillacs with the same Dallara chassis to a degree?
That's an interesting point. I've not really thought about it too much. Obviously, my American friend Jordan Taylor, he's always posting videos, with Fonzie on the steering wheel and stuff like that. I saw one the other day on Twitter, and I was taking quite a close look at, the interior of that Cadillac, so that was quite useful. Thanks for that, Jordan. There's a few little crossovers and stuff like that, and I was speaking to Pete Poe about the Cadillac and the characteristics, comparing that to sort of what I felt from the first couple of tests. So potentially some crossover when I get back in the Mazda in the States. I think obviously, that's we've got the quickest car on the grid. I think it's fair to say, judging on the first two races of this year there, we just we need to get some results now, and I'm sure that's going to come hopefully starting at Long Beach in a couple of weeks. But it's very interesting, obviously, driving different cars, and obviously very thankful to Mazda and Ford for being able to be involved in this opportunity with Hyundai Carlin.
Well, okay, we've got Ford to continue for the moment, at least to the end of the WEC season. 2 races to come, including, of course, the Le Mans 24 Hours. Full season IMSA, all bar the one race for you in the LMS. It would be quite a nice thing to put on the CV at the end of 2019, wouldn't it? Harry Tincknell race winner in 3 different cars.
I'll take that, yeah. And if nothing else, it's going to be good for the air miles. So looking forward to it. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting, and like I say, to be in at the start of hopefully what's going to become a really, really cool project with Carlin is awesome. So let's hope. Let's hope we can be winning in all 3. I think all 3 cars have the potential. All 3 teams have the potential. It's just a case of eking the most out of it. And I'm sure, like I say, with Carlin's history with Dallara and all, we've got people like Ricky Taylor involved as team manager at Carlin, and obviously all his race victories as team manager in World Series and GP2 over the years. So we've got really experienced.
Not that Ricky Taylor.
Not that Ricky Taylor. No. Not the. That would be a strange one. But so I think we've got the right people involved, and like I say, it's just a case of putting the pieces together. And I'm just sort of targeting the second half of the season really being, one of the front runners.
Exciting times ahead. Harry, for now, thanks for your time.
Excellent. Thanks, Graham.
Renger, thanks for making some time here before hopping on a plane out of San Francisco. You had a really promising start to the weekend down in Monterey with your, factory Acura NSX GT3. Race result didn't turn out the way you wanted, but let's just start heading into practice, then into qualifying. How tough is this field? How diverse are the cars and the teams? Sure looked like stiff competition.
Yeah, it's exactly that. The level of teams, the level of drivers is just in the world of GT is coming together in that race, I think in that series. And I think the people who are aiming for the whole championship, they are kind of taking the right guys to those kind of races as well. I think Spa, Bathurst, there's more people who want to do those races, and I think you can see that it filters out a little bit that who shows up here. I guess also in Kyalami, which are not the easiest races to go to because it's in somewhere in between other races where they do full season racing. But the good drivers, good teams, and I think it's stiff competition, and at the end it's also trying to make the most out of it. Trying to make the most out of it to win that championship. But we take it a bit step by step. So Honda missed the first race in Bathurst. We worked hard in practices to get the car sorted. I think we did a really good job because we were on pole with Mario Farnbacher doing the pole position lap. Was a mega lap. I mean, we didn't expect him to do that lap time. So that was good. We're not sure, looking back, how many of the other brands were kind of hiding in qualifying their pace, because in the race we struggled a bit more compared to them. But altogether, it was a steep learning curve because it was Jazz involved as the car builder and the team running the team. It's the Japanese from Honda, it's the Americans from Akula. So and then we had to rent equipment from actually it was Dream Racing for the truck and pit equipment. So was a lot going on, that's for sure.
So looking at the overall depth of the field, I mean, we saw obviously there was a handful of really good Mercedes. We had some BMW M6 GT3s. We had a very fast Ferrari that obviously ended up winning and such. At least for the first hour that I watched the live stream, I mean, it really appeared to be a very close, intensely close race, maybe to the point where I was wondering, I know that when balance of performance works correctly, in theory, nobody has an advantage because everything's super equal. I was almost wondering in that, the opening stages of the race, if there was too much parity or if the Pirellis were too good, because there just didn't seem to be a lot of separation from car to car. Did you see any of that, or what were your thoughts there, at least in the opening of the event?
Yeah, I think there was separation between the cars. I think it's Azarello is doing a fantastic job on the balance performance. It's just not an easy task to get everyone on the same kind of level from performance side on the cars, but everybody was struggling with tire degradation. The Laguna Seca racetrack has no grip basically, so we had to do 65-minute stints per driver, which is a big long run. And if you didn't take care of your tires, the rear would just fall off, and you would be struggling for the last 15 laps, or even have to pit for a set of new tires. So everybody knew in the paddock that that's going to be the game, so everybody took it kind of easy to see where they are with the tire degradation. So I think especially in the first 2-3 hours, you could see that it was a bit of a train, and it looked very much, because of that, like very close. But at the same time, I think the Ferrari was just a little bit ahead of everyone, together with the Porsche, who is good for their tires. So it's never gonna be equal performance over all the cars, but in this game, it was also about who was good for their tires to bring the car to the end. But it's for sure it was very close, and I think the only thing I was missing in that event was the multi-class racing. If we wanted to have some action, then I think we needed more cars involved to bring some chaos into the game. So right now, I think the level of drivers was just so high. Nobody made mistakes. There was not there was not a yellow at all, actually, during the whole 8 hours. So I think to mix it up a little bit more, I think they should throw another 10 or 15 GT4 cars in there, so that would make it interesting. But it was close for sure. It was a bit too close.
Well, let's talk about the overall number of entries. You touched on a point there that I thought was, well, actually, it's the whole reason that I decided to stay home. Coming off of 3 straight race weekends, I elected to not do a 4th, even though it's only a 90-minute drive south, and that was, at least for the main event, at least for the main Intercontinental round, just weren't that many entries. What does that do for you, Renger, as someone who's, you've raced so many things all throughout the world? We're obviously happy to have you full-time in IMSA in the WeatherTech Championship with Wayne Taylor, where we do have multi-class racing everywhere, but does it affect your mindset or enthusiasm at all coming into a weekend where you go, oh, there's only, 16 or so GT3 cars for the main field? Do you allow that to affect your, not your performance, but at least your appreciation or enthusiasm for the event?
Yeah, a little bit, for sure. I mean, the paddock was not very exciting, let's put it that way. There were not a lot of teams, there was not a lot of sport races there. But I think that's the strong thing about SRO. They are starting up something, and you see it's already growing, and I think in a few years from now it's going to look great. Look at the Spa 24 hours or some of the other events like Blanc Ben. They have to start from somewhere, right? And it will take a little bit time to make it a good show, but I think it's already going into the right direction. From my perspective, I'm there to win a race, and if it's 10 cars or 20 or 35, there's always very good cars to beat. So I better focus on that and win the race. But at the end, for sure, the enthusiasm, if you're going to a big event like Spa, which is part of the championship, that's a bit of a different feeling than we had last weekend. But like I say, it's a matter of time that will come as well in Laguna Seca.
Let's close, Renger, looking at how the weekend finished or how the event finished for you, and then looking ahead for your upcoming racing calendar. So, team experienced some issues for sure. You mentioned having to rent equipment. I know that there was an issue with a wheel gun that set your team back a little bit, and then I believe there was a possibly a suspension issue, I think, as well, which forced you to go behind the wall. Tell me about just the effort from the team to overcome the adversity that you had. And I ask that because, we normally just talk about hard racing and get to the checkered flag, but you also find out what a team is made of, even one that's kind of coming together, borrowing, or, so many different things coming in at once to do this one race. You find out what they're made of.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually a very good question, because Jazz, who is the car builder for Honda, so it's in Italy that the car is built. They are very known for the WTCC or the WTCR now races, and they won a lot of championships in those kind of races. And you can see that going into endurance racing for them is kind of a new game. We have to speed up a little bit. And you see the difference that it takes. Endurance racing is so exciting, actually, if you are deeply involved, like I am, with all the details that come with it. It's strategy, but it's also being smart with strategy, but also being smart with your equipment. The pit stops. There's so many rules to take care of, and for the team, it was completely new to go to an SRO event like this, where the rules now were a little bit different than they had in Spa 24 hour last year again. So it's they had to be on top of the game. I think from a driver's perspective, you're kind of helping them out, but when you're in the car, you cannot help them out in the pit wall as well. So it's really up to them to do the best job they can do. And like I say, the endurance racing, there's so much to it. So it's something what they have to go for a steep learning curve. I think they did well. I think there's still more to improve, and we did have a bit of issues. So I think it can only get better from here. And I'll try to help them out a little bit with that. But like you say, my main program is in IMSA. It's plug and play right there, because if you look at the Wayne Taylor Racing team, it's just amazing the level of performance that they have. I can show up in the weekend and they're telling me what to do. So that's something what is really nice. And I'm like I always say, my favorite championship is by far the IMSA championship. It's where I would like to love to be racing for another 10 years. And I think with the multi-class racing, it also shows you the excitement that it gives. And I think the other championship can also learn from that. But right now, coming back from Laguna Seca, in 2 weeks' time, I think I'm in Long Beach again with the WeatherTech Championship with Wayne Taylor Racing and the Cadillacs. And then after that, I think I'm going to be very busy because it's like 2 months in a row of racing, which I love to do. The problem I have is I'm very passionate about racing, so I would love to race every day,
Well, and you've also got a lovely family to look after as well. So between constant flights and a passion for racing, you also have a role as a husband and father, which adds to the fun. Well, let's talk about Long Beach as we wrap up here, Renger. So it's Sunday the 31st. You are 12 days or so away from getting on track here in Long Beach. What do you do between now and then? For those who don't know the life of a high-profile, international, professional driver like you, what is the next 10, 12 days like for you before you hit the track in Long Beach? And what do you do to either prepare or keep yourself busy?
Yeah, actually, I'm super busy, so that's a good question. I always look like a week ahead because otherwise you go crazy. But I'm flying home today, then with the family on Monday, so try to spend as much time with them. In between, you're doing your reports on the computer, somewhere in the plane, try to sleep a little. And then Tuesday, I still run a business for racing insurance. So we do a lot of race cars all around the world. We insure them. So I have a meeting on Tuesday morning. Then the rest of the week is doing all kinds of things, but also, like you say, spend as much time with the family, with 2 kids. I have now one 5-month-old boy and a 2.5-year girl. So it's fantastic, to see them grow up. And actually, leaving them for a week, it's amazing how much he is changing within 1 week. So I can't wait to see them. And at the same time, in 1.5 weeks ago from now, I travel back to California. So I'm traveling to Amsterdam now, where I live, and then from Amsterdam back to Long Beach for the event. So in between, there's a lot going on, but like you say, it's very important and nice to spend time with the family.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask Renger, as a full-fledged adult with a professional career who is hired to drive by multiple teams throughout the world, and a wife, and 2 kids, and a business, do you find it either entertaining or maddening or just weird that your teammate Jordan Taylor, in the same time you will spend doing all the things I just mentioned, he'll probably be at home making videos with his dog, right? There's just a slight difference in the level of adult responsibility between you and your teammate. Is that fun or funny, or do you just shake your head and say, you seriously need to get married and have a real life?
No, Jordan is a fantastic teammate, so I can only say good things about him. He's actually the best teammate I ever had, and it's funny because people ask me a lot about him, like, that crazy guy, who is he? And they like Bertrand or Farmbach, I knows them a little bit. My teammates from last weekend, they asked me about him, and he's a super professional guy to work with. And at the same time, he's making the joy out of it, which is a fantastic combination. And I can only say that that's fun to watch and a very good guy to work with. So he's a bit younger than me, so his kid is a dog, so he better takes well care of their dog, and we can enjoy his video as well. So all good with that.
Renger, as always, my man, thanks for taking some time, and I look forward to seeing you back here in California in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly, and I'll see you there. I hope everybody comes by. It's, of course, IndyCar, but the same weekend as us in IMSA, so I hope everybody comes already on the Saturday to watch the race. So I hope to see everyone there.
Then we'll have the racer party Saturday night, so you should come there smelling like champagne from winning, but then have more champagne and drink with us at the racer party. So I'll look forward to seeing you, brother.
I'll be there.
And that was the Dutch ace Renger van de Zande. He was preceded by Harry Tincknell, a fine, upstanding lad from the UK. Before him, an even more upstanding older gent from the UK, Lawrence Tomlinson. And then to open, a lovely, lovely American engineer in the form of Jeff Braun from the Core Autosport team, making us smarter and hopefully giving y'all a slightly deeper appreciation or just further insights as to what's happening on pit lane. Next week, I don't know who we're going to have. That's the fun. Again, please send in some suggestions. Are there any particular guests you would like for us to have on? Inside the Sports Car Paddock, we can usually make it happen within a week or two, unless they hate us. There aren't many of those folks, but there's always a risk that someone might say, "No, Pruitt, you idiot," or "No, Goodwin," although everybody likes Graham, so that part's pretty easy. Last quick note, which I've been mentioning of late, MarshallPruittPodcast.com. It's a thing. It's alive. It's working. It's functional. All 500 plus episodes that we have put up since we launched this little baby in May of 2016 are now living on MarshallPruittPodcast.com. Every episode of Inside the Sports Car Paddock, Week in IndyCar, Week in Sports Cars, My Racing Life and Career, all the in-car audio, ambient audio features, special features, blah, blah, blah. It's all there. Would love it if you go check it out. Also has just about every option I think you might want in order to subscribe and get everything that we post the moment it goes live. All right, with all that said, I'm Marshall Pruitt. This is the Marshall Pruitt Podcast brought to you by Cooper Tires and the Justice Brothers. Thank you for listening.